The Pentagon didn't just release UFO files, it released proof of things that shouldn't be possible. These aren't rumors or leaks. They're documented encounters the Pentagon still can't explain. And the most unsettling part? These are the things they want you to see. Number 50. In September 2023, the FBI was trying to understand what a drone operator at a U.S. site had just seen. In a declassified video, the man explains that he and his colleagues had all witnessed a bright light over the horizon. Surrounded by a dazzling glow, the object was, quote, metallic gray, linear, about 1 to 2 Black Hawk helicopters in length, and definitely bigger than a drone. It looked like a vehicle of some kind, but it had no exhaust or wings. It hovered at about 5,000 feet, and it moved from east to west. And then within 5 to 10 seconds, it was gone. It freaked the man out, but that night a storm battered the town. He was still on edge as he sat in his hotel room when suddenly his TV went black. He told the FBI for the next 2 nights he could barely sleep, and when he did, his mind was tormented with strange dreams. Had he made contact? To better understand, let's go back to when all of this talk of UFOs in the USA first got off the ground. Number 49. At the end of World War II, US and British intelligence were trying to figure out if Nazi scientists had built superweapons. They actually had the V-1 and V-2 rockets, but declassified documents show us that something was spotted in the skies above Europe, and it wasn't a rocket. On November 4, 1948, a top-secret US Air Force Europe document stated, "For some time, we have been concerned by the recurring reports of flying saucers. One of these machines was observed, quote, hovering over Neubiberg Air Base for about 30 minutes. U.S. authorities were stumped, writing that whatever these vehicles were might, quote, be beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking." Number 48. In a secret report, one of these machines was described as having extreme maneuverability and apparent ability to almost hover, a plan approximating that of an oval disc with dome shape on the surface, the ability to quickly disappear by high speed or complete disintegration, the ability to group together or very quickly in a tight formation. Nothing built by man could do that, so what had they seen? Number 47. One of the men tasked with understanding these alien-like machines was the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover. Declassified files show that he wasn't a believer, but more or less every week, another UFO document landed on his desk. One of them shows that on October 9, 1967, a woman appeared at the FBI office in Dallas. She claimed in July of that year she'd been kidnapped by aliens. A quote, being from another planet who had assumed earthly form took her into the sky aboard a spaceship and gave her some important information. She claimed that the aliens had told her that on May 22, 1962, American forces had fired a missile at a UFO over Africa, but the craft had protected itself using a force field. She also alleged that the U.S. forces had tracked another UFO over Antarctica on August 20, 1967. The woman insisted that if the investigators could verify those incidents, it would prove her story was genuine, but she refused to give her name. Because, she warned, UFO whistleblowers had a habit of disappearing or meeting unfortunate ends. As bizarre as that sounds, similar claims kept pouring into the FBI offices. On May 14, 1969, a man named Larry Stevens wrote to the Bureau asking agents to investigate rumors of mysterious men dressed in black and driving black cars who allegedly intimidated UFO witnesses while sometimes impersonating FBI agents. It's easy to dismiss everyone in these files as either crazy or just looking for attention, but many of the reports came from very credible sources. Number 46. 3 servicemen from the 147th Airways and Air Communications Squadron stationed in Guam reported that at 10:40 a.m. on August 14, 1946, they saw 2 crescent-shaped objects streaking overhead. They estimated they were traveling at twice the speed of America's fastest fighter aircraft. Flying roughly at 1,200 feet, the objects suddenly broke into sharp zigzag maneuvers before disappearing from sight. It sounds strange coming from military personnel, but reports like this carried on well into the 21st century. Number 45. In just 2 days in May 2023, 7 different people who worked for the federal government reported seeing the unexplainable in the sky in the western U.S. Event 1, 3 separate teams of federal law enforcement special agents reported seeing 2 or 3 glowing red orbs hanging in the night sky. According to their accounts, the larger objects appeared to release smaller orbs, almost like a mother craft deploying smaller vehicles. The smaller lights swooped downward before all of them suddenly vanished. Event 2. Several agents described witnessing a single red orb suspended above a rocky peak, seemingly connected to it by what looked like a glowing spindle of light. The object hovered in complete silence. One witness compared it to the Eye of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings. After remaining motionless for roughly a minute, it disappeared. Event 3. 2 agents reported spotting what first appeared to be a car moving through a restricted area at night, but something was wrong. The vehicle, displaying one red light and one white light, seemed to hover around 3 feet above the ground. When the agents moved toward it, the object slid sideways across the desert with what one witness described as zero resistance. To this day, neither the witness nor the U.S. authorities have offered a definitive explanation for what they saw. Let's keep this next one simple. Simple but insane. Number 44. A now declassified composite sketch reveals what witnesses told the FBI they saw in the sky. Except this didn't happen during the UFO hysteria of the 1940s or 50s. This happened in 2023. Witnesses described a bronze metallic ellipsoid bursting from a blinding light before vanishing without a trace. And this is just the start. Number 43. On April 24, 1964, police officer Lonnie Zamora was giving chase to a speeding car in Socorro, New Mexico, when in the distance he saw a flame and heard a strange roaring sound. He thought it might be a building explosion, but the closer he got to it, he noticed it was flying. There was no smoke. The roar changed frequency. He drove closer and he noticed what appeared to be a shiny object with 2 legs fixed to the ground. Meanwhile, 2 people in white overalls lurked nearby. Was it some kind of crash? He drove closer so he could help out, but there was another roar and suddenly the object was moving vertically upwards with fire bursting beneath it. This sighting became known as the Lonnie Zamora incident. It's never been established what he saw that day, but it sounded a lot like what a senior U.S. intelligence official witnessed sometime in 2025. Number 42. This declassified file is heavily redacted. Not even a location is given, but at around 5 p.m. at a high-security test site in the U.S., an official saw an orb in the sky and heard a thud as if it had hit the ground. He subsequently took out a helicopter to go search. The man claimed he and another official spotted a super hot object hovering in the sky near where the first object had landed. It headed east and then south, and it seemed to break off into 2 separate pieces, both moving at high speed. Then it became clear. 2 large orbs hovering at the side of each other that seemed to flare. They were oval, orange, with a white or yellow center and light emitting from them. Suddenly another appeared and then another, until there were 5 in total, all hovering for a while and then vanishing. The men saw them again later near a mountain moving in a horizontal line. They disappeared, but 3 of them came out of nowhere in a triangle formation. It's not certain what they had seen. So, are we being watched? Number 41. If we are, then that might explain what NASA astronauts saw in December 1972 during the Apollo 17 mission. The agency took a photograph of what appeared to be 3 dots in space seen from the moon, each one forming a triangle. To this day, there's no consensus on what they are. Number 40. In 2025, the FBI officially submitted a photo to the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, as an unidentified anomalous phenomenon. At first glance, the photo looks completely empty, just another blurry sky shot. But look closer and there is a small black dot. It doesn't look like anything special, but neither can it be explained. Just as the figure that appeared in another image, this one had the shape of a helicopter, but there certainly wasn't a helicopter in the sky when the image was seen and recorded. Sometimes those objects get too close for comfort. Number 39. Władysław Krasuski was a Polish POW in 1944 when he was driving a tractor close to the German camp where he was a laborer. As he approached some swampland, the engine suddenly cut out and he heard a high-pitched whine in the distance. An SS guard soon appeared on the scene and helped start the tractor. The laborers didn't think too much about it until 3 hours later. The work crew looked up and saw some kind of vehicle rise vertically into the sky. It hovered slowly to the side and then it disappeared behind some trees. It was circular and 225 to 300 feet in diameter, dark gray in color with 2 main sections. One of the parts spun around at a high speed, creating what the documents called a continuous blur. Krasuski told this story when he landed in the US after the war. He swore that he and about 18 other crew, Polish, French, and Russian, all had seen the same thing. The information was kept secret for many years. As US authorities were telling people there were no such things as UFOs, They were actively investigating stories such as the one told by Krasuski. But sometimes the saucers weren't just hoaxes. Number 38. The declassified documents contain letters sent between various departments. They describe everything from unexplainable phenomena to kids playing tricks in what was fast becoming a nation obsessed with UFOs. One of these letters is dated July 11, 1947, and it reveals a Mrs. Easterbrook appeared to find a flying saucer in her backyard of her house in Twin Falls, Idaho. She had heard a crash and went outside to investigate. She found 2 discs with a plastic dome attached. U.S. media reported flying saucers have invaded Twin Falls. FBI Special Agent in charge, Guy Bannister, got on the case. Despite the press saying the U.S. government was involved in a cover-up, the FBI claimed the flying saucer was actually a contraption made by local kids. Maybe it was, but that doesn't mean the agency wasn't taking other sightings seriously. Number 37. By the year 2024, UAP sightings were no longer landing on the desk of the FBI, and very rarely, if ever, did they make it to the newspapers. Like the sighting in October, when an unnamed soldier in Syria reported observing a misshapen and uneven ball of white light. He described seeing multiple glares or light emanating from an unknown origin. That was just another report that went into the basket of things that couldn't be explained. Number 36. On September 23, 1947, General Nathan Twining, a highly respected officer who would later become Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, wrote a classified memo titled Flying Discs. Twining was not joking when he wrote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." He described the reported objects as displaying extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly roll, and action which must be considered evasive. He admitted it was unclear whether the craft was manually piloted, remotely controlled, or operated automatically. But of one thing he was certain: whatever people were seeing, it was real. And the witnesses were not attention seekers or flying saucer obsessives. Many were trained military personnel, pilots, and observers accustomed to identifying aircraft. That didn't mean that Twining believed the objects came from outer space. His main concern was just as frightening: that a foreign power might have developed a revolutionary form of propulsion outside of our domestic knowledge. Then, someone died while trying to chase one. Number 35. On January 7, 1948, Thomas Mantell, a 25-year-old pilot with Kentucky's National Guard, died while pursuing what he had been told was a potentially dangerous UFO. Earlier that day, ordinary citizens around Maysville, Kentucky, roughly 80 miles from Goodman Air Force Base, began calling local police to report something strange moving across the sky. Then, more calls came in. People were describing an object unlike anything they'd ever seen before. This wasn't a prank. The situation escalated when Air Force personnel, including a base commander and a colonel, also reported seeing the object. The colonel described it as very white, saying it looked like an umbrella, with what appeared to be red bands around its underside. Multiple witnesses observed it for at least an hour. At the time, 4 F-51 Mustangs were already in the air, including Mantell's aircraft. One plane landed for fuel while the others were ordered to intercept the object. Mantell soon radioed back, "It is on sight above and ahead of me and appears to be moving about half my speed, or approximately 180 miles an hour." He described the object as metallic and of tremendous size. 2 pilots continued the pursuit at first, but one eventually turned back. Mantell kept climbing. Then radio contact was lost. Moments later, his aircraft crashed into a fiery heap. The next day, newspapers carried headlines like F-51 and Captain Mantell destroyed, chasing flying saucer. U.S. authorities later claimed Mantell had actually been pursuing a classified skyhook balloon, a top-secret high-altitude research device that could not be publicly discussed at the time. To this day, there is still some doubt about what he actually saw. Just like in the next case, the U.S. military still can't always explain what its personnel see in the sky. Number 34. In January 2024, somewhere over the Mediterranean Sea, close to Greece, an operator reported spotting something diamond-shaped traveling about 434 knots. He described it as having a non-maneuvering probe at the bottom and only visible when viewed via an onboard shortwave infrared sensor. It was there, and 2 minutes later, it was gone. U.S. military personnel often report seeing these objects moving in a way that is scientifically impossible, like what an operator saw above the Arabian Sea in October 2020. Number 33. The declassified file states that a man noticed a round, cold object via infrared sensor traveling at 319 degrees northwest at approximately 20 miles per hour. The part that was impossible was that it was able to make, quote, abrupt directional changes that aircraft just aren't capable of doing. Like the next cases, these were kept secret from the public. Number 32. For years, U.S. authorities publicly downplayed UFOs, insisting they posed no major threat, while quietly investigating them through a series of secretive programs: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and later Project Blue Book. One case that ended up in those files involved an American Airlines DC-6 departing Washington National Airport in 1950. Shortly after takeoff, the crew encountered what the pilot described as a brilliant glowing object heading directly toward the aircraft. As I looked to my left, the pilot later reported, the object appeared to come to a stop. He described it as perfectly streamlined and without wings or tail section. The object then maneuvered around the aircraft, moved off to the right side of the plane, and paced it briefly before suddenly accelerating away into the distance. We watched it for several seconds more until it disappeared in the east out of sight, the captain said. I have never seen anything like it before or since. Even more concerning were the reports of similar objects sometimes surfacing near some of America's most sensitive nuclear facilities. Number 31. In 1952, the FBI received a classified message. Several staff at the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission's Savannah River Plant facility in South Carolina had seen 4 disc-shaped flying objects approach the plant and then vanish. They appeared again and vanished again. Described as goldish in color and moving at high speed, they were completely silent. And that became just another report that gathered dust. Number 30. Like the one made by Mr. John P. Legge in Codroy, Newfoundland in July 1947. Legge told authorities he was standing outside of his store when something lit up the sky. Not a shooting star, not a plane. He'd never seen anything like it. For about 15 seconds, he saw this thing fly through the night sky, a disc-shaped object, followed by a cone-shaped afterglow. And that was it. The report was filed as confidential and hidden for many decades, just like this next declassified report, which is even more mind-bending. Number 29. When M. Lenore Corey wrote to the Director of Military Intelligence in August 1947, she made a point of saying that she didn't want to be dismissed as a victim of mass psychology or some kind of crackpot. She was educated. She wasn't interested in silly flying saucer stories. But what she claimed to have seen from a bus window in Los Angeles couldn't be easily explained. A saucer-shaped object flying across the sky, with several more following behind it in a trail. Beautiful rays of light seemed to beam from the objects. Corey reasoned that the U.S. Army wouldn't be firing mysterious rays over the people of LA, so what exactly had she witnessed? Number 28. In 1952, CIA reports stated that flying saucers had been seen zigzagging over mining regions in the Belgian Congo. According to the files, a Belgian military pilot pursued one of the objects in a jet and managed to get within roughly 395 feet of it. He described the craft as silver with a rotating underside, capable of speeds beyond Mach 1. When it accelerated, he said flames appeared behind it. The CIA paid close attention. At the time, the agency had a significant strategic interest in the Congo and its natural resources. For a while, parts of the UK became a UFO hotspot. Number 27. The FBI's news clippings found in the files include a British news media report from December 3, 1950. Football crowds see flying saucer. The report said a soccer match had to be stopped as hundreds of fans looked up and saw a strange white phenomenon dart across the sky. Nearby, a rugby game also came to a halt when players looked up and saw what looked like an alien spaceship. The U.S. authorities were obviously keeping tabs on what was happening across the pond, but unfortunately most of the news clippings in the files don't come with an explanation of what the U.S. agencies thought about the strange goings-on. Number 26. In October 2001, the Russians sent a message to the U.S. State Department denying it had flown mysterious planes over Georgian airspace and started bombing. The Georgian Foreign Ministry complained, and the Russians countered that what had been seen couldn't have been Russian, so it must have been a UFO. The confidential cables addressed this by saying the Russians are prone to making the odd, bold lie. It seems UFOs at times can function as excuses, but maybe the Russians were right. Now for a real-life space horror movie. Number 25. Some very strange things happened on the Apollo 17 mission. Command Module pilot Ronald Evans said in a report that he'd witnessed very bright particles or fragments drifting and tumbling near the spacecraft as it maneuvered. Lunar Module pilot Harrison Jack Schmitt backed him up, describing what he saw as looking like the 4th of July. Another astronaut, Mission Commander Eugene A. Cernan, had a different experience. He had not been able to sleep, saying that after seeing bright streaks, he saw an imposing, intense light flashing in with the intensity of a train's headlights. He believed he saw these things. They weren't just optical phenomena. And down on Earth, things were also getting strange. Number 24. The recent files release shows how dedicated the FBI was at collecting UFO-related newspaper articles. One of them, dated October 14, 1957, featured Captain W.J. Hull, a Western Airlines pilot who'd once gone on record and called UFOs a load of bunk. But he changed his mind when he saw one for himself in Mobile, Alabama. He was flying a small plane when he saw what he described as a brilliant meteor flying through the sky, except that this meteor just stopped and did an about turn, something that is physically impossible. It then performed a series of violent turns, mesmerizing and scaring him, and suffice it to say, this once stalwart skeptic of UFOs was a changed man. He wasn't the only one. Number 23. That same year, retired Navy Admiral Delmer S. Varney, the man once overseeing America's guided missile program, made a chilling admission. He said he had seen evidence of objects in the sky moving too fast, too intelligently, and too impossibly to belong to the US, Russia, or anyone else. He had never claimed to see a flying saucer himself, but he made one thing clear: something unexplainable was out there. These were serious people, not crackpots. And then saucers turned into cigars. Number 22. In 1954, witnesses swore they had seen a cigar-shaped object flying over Sétif, Algeria, an object that CIA files said left a glowing blue trail behind it. That same year, dock workers in Kuala Lumpur reported seeing another cigar-shaped craft streaking overhead, also leaving a trail in its wake. Then, over the following 5 days, declassified documents recorded 3 more separate sightings in Kuala Lumpur of what witnesses described as a cylindrical flying machine. What exactly was the cigar-shaped object people across continents kept reporting? A group of hikers near Saint-Mexal, France, all described seeing the same thing: a giant flying cigar moving silently around 2,000 feet above their heads. Were flying cigars real? Number 21. Over the years, the US took those reports seriously. Experts often said many of the events could be explained by natural phenomena, but about 20% were too strange to be rational. As for the rational explanation, one man that often appears in declassified files said he knew exactly what these machines were. Number 20. George Klein had been a top scientist in the war for the Nazi War Production Ministry. He was also one of the men who said Nazi flying saucers were real. So when the FBI was collecting newspaper clippings, there was one with Klein stating that all these UFOs were actually just the US and Russia making superweapons after stealing Nazi scientists at the end of the war. The problem with this theory is that no such Nazi wonder weapon was ever uncovered. Still, Klein insisted he'd personally worked on a Nazi flying saucer prototype, one he claimed could climb to 40,000 feet in just 3 minutes. At the time, no publicly known aircraft on the Earth could do anything close to that. Maybe Klein was lying, maybe he was exaggerating, or maybe the superpowers of the world really were developing technologies far beyond anything the public had been told existed. Number 19. In 1954, Major James Ziccarelli reported seeing a UFO at Brookley Air Force Base in Alabama. He described it as a plane he had never seen before with short, stubby wings. He and others at the base saw it on radar, saying that it moved gracefully and silent and then just vanished. And there were more sightings of something similar in Europe. Number 18. In Sweden, Bengt Nordenskjöld, the commander-in-chief of the Swedish Air Force, said his personnel had witnessed something impossible over the Baltic coast. Witnesses described a metallic disc-shaped object moving in ways no conventional aircraft should have been able to. According to the reports, it flew faster than the speed of sound at an altitude of roughly 5,000 feet. What made the sighting even more unsettling was where it occurred, close to a former Nazi research facility that had since fallen under Soviet control. But one man had a different explanation. Number 17. Major Donald Kehoe, a former Marine Corps naval aviator, had a very different theory from Klein. In statements that later appeared in classified files, Kehoe argued that the flying saucers weren't secret superweapons at all. They were interplanetary craft operated by an alien civilization. Kehoe, a man who should have understood the inner workings of the Air Force better than most civilians, claimed the US government already knew this. It was deliberately hiding the truth to avoid public panic. The Air Force pushed back hard. Officials insisted they would continue investigating UFO reports, but they refused to publicly acknowledge that flying saucers were real or extraterrestrial in origin. So what did experts behind closed doors actually believe? Number 16. On May 5, 1955, the U.S. Air Force released Special Report Number 14, titled Analysis of Reports of Unidentified Aerial Objects. The study examined roughly 4,000 UFO sightings reported mainly by ordinary citizens, but also by military personnel, police officers, pilots, and other officials. The report concluded that many of the apparently unexplained events lacked reliable measurements or enough physical evidence to reach firm conclusions. It was one of the largest official UFO studies ever conducted. Its overall conclusion was that it was highly improbable the unidentified aerial objects were extraterrestrial in origin. But the report also admitted a number of sightings could still not be explained, and not everyone involved agreed with the conclusions. Number 15. The Blue Book director, Edward James Ruppelt, the man usually credited with replacing the term flying saucer with UFO, called the military's press release about the report worthless. He went to the effort to write a book about it, saying that we're stuck with UFOs. He didn't think they could all be explained, but so far the investigations had all been weak. This was an important piece of writing. Changing the flying saucer to UFO was more in line with scientific reasoning. But humans were back to square one. We knew nothing. Well, maybe. Number 14. In 1960, Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, former CIA director and later on the board of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, dropped a bombshell in an article published in the New York Times. This man was a major figure in American intelligence, and now he was saying that the U.S. Air Force was silencing its own personnel about UFOs to hide the truth. In his own words, he said, "Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense." He was wrong about things. Not all personnel were silenced. Number 13. B-29 test mechanic Robert B. Gardner said he had spotted two silver-green objects flying over San Francisco Airport at terrific speeds. He explained they looked like a cone clipped at both ends, flying at about 12,000 feet at a staggering 1,800 miles per hour. The year was 1953, and at that point in time, the fastest flying machine was the Bell X-1A, which could reach about 1,600 miles per hour. Did any of these incidents produce believable photographs? Number 12. One of the events that has perplexed experts is the photograph a couple at a farm in McMinnville, Oregon took in 1950. Paul and Evelyn Trent claimed they had seen a saucer-shaped object roughly 300 feet wide hovering above their property, with what they described as a flat underside. The CIA quietly examined the photographs, while Life later published them for the world to see. Over the years, both the original prints and their negatives underwent professional analysis. In 1967, astronomer William Hartman of the University of Colorado, a scientist specifically tasked with critically examining and debunking UFO claims, reached a shocking conclusion. This is one of the few UFO reports in which all factors investigated, geometric, psychological, and physical, appear to be consistent with the assertion that an extraordinary flying object, silvery, metallic, disc-shaped, tens of meters in diameter, and evidently artificial, flew within sight of two witnesses. The Trents never changed their story. Decades later, when they were interviewed as an elderly couple in 1997, they still insisted the photograph showed exactly what they had seen that day. They said they'd originally hesitated to make the images public because they feared the object might have been part of a secret military project. And there was another image that would become legendary. Number 11. One of the FBI documents dated June 8, 1967, shows us that a man named Paul Payarl provided the agency information that possibly proved the Nazis built a UFO. Payarl claimed that he saw it hover above the Black Forest in 1944. The now declassified document states, "During this period, he observed the aircraft described above. It was disc-shaped, remotely controlled, and equipped with several jet engines on the outer part of the structure. The machine had an outer section that spun around a central dome, while the rest of it remained stationary. It's interesting that the UFOs people often see looked exactly like the ones in sci-fi movies, but Payarl took a picture. All that remains of it is a Xerox copy of a negative, so it's not very clear. The hardest events to explain are those in which several people saw the same thing." Number 10. On February 10, 1951, just before 1 a.m., a U.S. Navy Douglas R-5D transport plane carrying 31 people, crossed the skies above Keflavik when the crew spotted something impossible. Roughly 1,500 feet above the ocean, a strange glowing object appeared beneath them. It was silent, bright, and moving in ways they couldn't explain. Everyone on board reportedly saw it, a disc-shaped object with an orange-red glow around its perimeter. As the object drew closer, the pilots said their instruments began to fail. The heading indicator malfunctioned along with the magnetic compass and 2 direction finders. Then as the aircraft moved away from the object, the instruments suddenly returned to normal. The incident remained classified for years, but surviving documents suggest Navy intelligence took the encounter seriously. Roughly 9 months later, investigators reportedly visited the pilot and showed him what amounted to a police lineup of UFO photographs, asking whether any matched what he had seen that night over the Atlantic. This wasn't some publicity seeker or eccentric chasing fame. He was a trusted military pilot whose account was treated as credible by the people investigating it. Just like this next man. Number 9. Again in 1951, L. Gordon Cooper was flying his F-86 Thunderjet in Germany when he saw a group of objects moving in ways not possible with human engineering. He would later work for NASA in Project Mercury, the U.S.'s first space program. He was smart and trustworthy, so when he told his superiors he'd seen a metallic silver saucer in the sky, people listened. After retiring from NASA with the rank of colonel and 222 hours in space under his belt, he wrote a book claiming the government was actively suppressing information about UFOs. He detailed a separate incident in 1957 where his crew had captured footage of a landed saucer at a California airbase. When he handed the film over to Washington, everything went quiet. He was locked out of his own story. Until his dying breath, he was certain the government was involved in a UFO cover-up. Some stories were just too crazy to rationally explain. Number 8. Over the years, there have been claims that the CIA used UFOs as a form of misdirection. There may be some truth to that idea, but the declassified documents show us a more complicated picture. Some people within the CIA were, on paper, deeply concerned about what it saw as the public's growing gullibility and how hostile powers might exploit it. Some files even discussed the danger of Soviet-engineered mass hysteria or psychological warfare built around UFO panic. One document stated the agency needed to reduce the current gullibility of the public and consequently their susceptibility to propaganda. That concern helped lead to the creation of the Robertson Panel in 1953, backed by the CIA and chaired by Howard P. Robertson, one of the most respected physicists in the world. Its mission was straightforward: investigate the flying saucer phenomenon and debunk it once and for all. And when the panel finally got to work, this is what happened. Number 7. The same year the panel was convened, a major stationed at George Air Force Base in California reported seeing 5 enormous disc-shaped objects flying in formation above the base. And he was far from the only witness. Over the next 12 weeks, 9 more sightings of similar objects were reported at the same installation. Then, on the very same day the major witnessed the discs, military personnel at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona reported seeing something equally weird. 12 unidentified objects flying in formation at estimated speeds of between 1,500 and 2,000 miles per hour. It was the kind of performance that was beyond anything publicly known to exist in the 1950s. The legendary Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird wouldn't emerge from the secret world of Area 51 until the mid-1960s. And these super-fast vehicle sightings weren't only confined to the US. In September 1953, NATO warships participating in Operation Mainbrace were crossing the North Atlantic. During the mission, a Danish naval commander and his crew reported a glowing triangular object tearing across the sky at roughly 900 miles per hour. It was also glowing with an eerie blue light. Over the following weeks, more sightings emerged from personnel involved in the exercise. None of them were explained. Then, right after, came an incident in Yorkshire, northern England. RAF personnel reported that an unidentified object appeared to shadow one of their Meteor jet fighters in flight. One airman later described the object as a silver disc. It stopped its descent and hung in the air, rotating as if on its own axis, he said. Then it accelerated at an incredible speed to the west. But what happened when investigators believed they had found not just a sighting, but actual physical evidence? Number 5. Arthur Stansel, a technician connected to the Nevada test site, would later become part of UFO legend. In a sworn statement, he claimed that on May 21, 1953, he'd helped recover part of a crashed UFO near Kingman, Arizona. According to his account, the object was, quote, constructed of an unfamiliar metal which resembled brushed aluminum. He said he and several other men dug it out of the sand where it had partially embedded itself after impact. The craft, he claimed, was oval-shaped, roughly 30 feet in diameter, with 2 swivel seats and a cabin filled with strange instruments. He later described it as something so many people had seen all over the world, a teardrop-shaped cigar, a streamlined cigar. Then came the detail that would one day make Americans feel like they weren't alone. A tent pitched near the object sheltered the dead remains of the only occupant, he stated. Occupant, as in alien. So what exactly had Stancil claimed that he had seen? In his own words, the being was about 4 feet tall with a dark brown complexion. It had 2 eyelids, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and a small mouth. He said it wore a silvery metallic suit along with a skull cap made from the same material. According to Stancil, he wasn't alone. Other technicians present that day supposedly saw the same thing. And now comes the strangest part. Number 4. In classified government documents, intelligence officials reportedly referred to Arthur Stancil using the name Fritz Werner. Those files describe how Stancil and other technicians were allegedly transported to the crash site aboard a bus with blacked-out windows. Then in 2024, another document surfaced online relating to Werner. It appeared to contain messages exchanged between a U.S. government official and Christopher Mellon, the former Senate Intelligence Committee staffer who later became involved in the Pentagon's investigation into UAPs. In the exchange, the official suggested that the truth about the Kingman crash would leave people slack-jawed. He spoke about the incident as though it remained an active matter even into the 2020s, reportedly saying, "We're vacuuming up info." That's the kind of language that could be interpreted as an admission that authorities were still suppressing or collecting information connected to the case. If genuine, the messages appear to suggest that a supposedly high-ranking official believed that there was at least some truth behind Stancil's extraordinary claims. Unfortunately, the latest tranche of released documents doesn't appear to add much concrete evidence to the Kingman story, but the allegations reminded us of something that went down in the UK. Number 3. After years of sightings and growing distrust in CIA-linked UFO investigations, the Condon Committee was formed. It was a project funded by the U.S. Air Force and the University of Colorado to scientifically study unidentified flying objects. One of the cases that got the committee's attention took place in 1956 at RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, England. Radar operators tracked an object moving at several thousand miles per hour. Then suddenly the radar began to show dozens of them. According to the reports, the equipment was checked and found to be functioning properly. Witnesses said smaller objects appeared to dart around the much larger one, and multiple servicemen observed the event. Something very similar happened nearby at RAF Lakenheath. There, the object wasn't only picked up on radar, it was reportedly seen visually as well. Witnesses described it stopping dead in the sky, accelerating instantly, and moving at extraordinary speeds. Lakenheath personnel contacted RAF Neatstead, also in Suffolk, which scrambled a de Havilland Venom night fighter to intercept the target. The Venom's 2-man crew later reported they had the object both on radar and in direct visual sight. Then, without warning, the target appeared behind them before they could react. Eventually, the jet ran low on fuel and was forced to break off the pursuit and land. The Condon report would later describe the encounter as the most puzzling and unusual case it had ever examined. So what exactly were these objects that seemed capable of outrunning and outmaneuvering military aircraft? Were they connected to the same phenomena reported by American test pilots and radar crews across the Cold War world? Number 2. X-15 pilot Joseph Walker was flying at Mach 4 when he said into the radio 2 UFOs just passed overhead. They flew right past him. They were doing 3,400 miles per hour, as fast as any plane in existence. He said he got within about 200 feet of them and saw that they were disc-shaped. Walker never got to speak about UFOs later in his life, as he died in a group formation accident in 1966. But his words resonated with Major Robert White, another X-15 pilot. He was traveling at 314,000 feet when he saw several objects flying nearby. He told Time magazine, "There are things out there. There absolutely are. This last one is important." Number 1. In 2014, The Guardian posed a question. Rather than covering up the existence of aliens, could it be that the real conspiracy has been persuading us to believe in them? The article referred to what appeared to be a CIA-linked psychological operation in which fake classified UFO documents were deliberately circulated to the public. These documents became known as Majestic 12 papers. secret files ostensibly proving top U.S. officials had concealed evidence of alien contact for decades. Except the documents were exposed as forgeries, disinformation designed to inflame UFO hysteria rather than calm it down. The fallout destroyed UFO researcher Paul Benowitz. After receiving supposedly leaked information from Air Force intelligence sources, he became convinced extraterrestrials were operating on Earth. He later suffered a severe psychological breakdown. So for years, the files show us that intelligence agencies had warned that the American public was vulnerable to mass hysteria surrounding UFOs. Yet, there were allegations that elements inside the national security world had actively fueled those same fears. Why? No one knows. But some researchers point toward the Psychological Strategy Board, a Cold War-era body created to coordinate American psychological operations and propaganda efforts. Few ideas can capture the public imagination more effectively than UFOs and little green men. All the documents you've heard about today are real, but as history shows, facts and fiction have a habit of becoming entangled, especially when governments, fear, propaganda, and the unknown collide. The truth is out there, somewhere, and it might be very human. Or maybe it's not. But if you're looking for proof, it's not just buried in the Pentagon files anymore. It's in close encounters, witnessed up close by trained personnel who knew exactly what should and shouldn't be in their skies. Find out what they saw in actual video of US military intercepting UFOs. Or watch this instead.